Welcome to CABTalk. This morning we have us two new people on, and I would like to welcome Heather. Now, if I'm a bit nervous today, it's because I am. I am now in control of the controls with the great able assistance of Veronica and Michael. So good morning to you and welcome to Heather. Now, Heather is one of my co-workers at Citizens Advice, and Heather has a special job at CAB. She is the person who collects all the information that we do on our case sheets and collects and checks what we do. What are you called?
Peer reviewer.
Now, where are you, Heather? Two. There you are. Heather, are you on deck?
I am, I think.
Is Heather on deck?
You need to turn it on.
I've got that one on. What's that? The CD. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, I am a newbie. Just as well, we've got this wonderful assistant here. No, welcome, Heather. Heather, you are one of our checkers. You do a marvellous job correcting our case sheets and helping us to get a better result for our clients. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming to save my bacon today.
I don't know about that. I'm newer than you and I know nothing about this process. I do know some things about CAB though, because I've been in it for a few years now.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot.
Right, so to get started, we need to tell people really what CAB does, don't we?
We do?
Yeah. So one of the most important things that I feel that we do at CAB, and it's really part of our motto, is we empower people to help themselves.
Absolutely. And one of the things that does empower people is information. And our job is to find enough information for them to be able to solve their own problem, or we can direct them to people who have the information that will help them to be able to resolve their issue.
Yes, and so today we're going to look at some of the really nitty problems that came up during the lockdown and now post COVID-19 and things that are ongoing.
Yeah, we will do that today. One of the things that we noticed that during the lockdown, the problems that came through seemed to be really intense, much more so than the normal day-to-day stuff, some of which, of course, is very intense and some of it's not so much.
Yeah. And, you know, in the past we used to get a lot of local inquiries about directions to different places, but the inquiries have got a lot more difficult, haven't they?
They have, and one of the things about when you're just working within your local community too, because we live in this community, we know who's who in the community, and so a lot of the information we know off the top of our heads, or we know where we can direct people to find out what they need to know, because we already know a lot about it.
Yes.
But during the lockdown, there were different rules set up by the government and how society was to operate and what we were allowed to do and particularly not allowed to do.
Yes.
That we didn't know off the top of our head because it was all brand new instruction. So we had to do a lot more research to help people find the answers that they were looking for.
We certainly did, and it was quite tricky at times.
It certainly was.
And the good thing I found when we were operating, and we did operate with one shift a day in lockdown, and we weren't open to the public walk-in. We were just operating on our 0800 number and our local phone number, was that we did have to ring people back a lot.
Yeah, we did. Normally we don't. Because we're in an office and we have our computer system and database available to us. We can have somebody on the phone and be looking on the computer at the same time and then when you find something, you can talk to people and say, I found this. Is this helpful? Is this what you need? If it's not, you can search a bit further. If it is, fine, job done.
Yeah.
But when you're working remotely from home, you don't have that facility available to you, so you have to do your research and then get back to the person.
Yes, and that became quite tricky at times when people didn't give their phone number very clearly.
Yes.
And it was so important to get that correct phone number, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Some inquiries come in via email, and that actually gives you a little bit more time too, because you've got time to do your research and find out as much information as you can, and then get back to the person.
Yes.
So should we just explain how the system worked? That our CAB people were working from their homes, but the CAB National had set up an 0800 phone number, so that if you wanted advice, you rang the 0800 number.
Yes.
And that was directed to the nearest available person, which could be anywhere around the country. And so that person then did the research and got back to the person who was inquiring.
Can you just get a wee bit closer to your mic? That's better. Thank you. Yes, and it seemed to work really well.
Well, nobody didn't get a response, did they? We managed to get a response to everybody who inquired. Some took a bit longer than others.
Yes.
But one thing I noticed, because my job is the checker, which means that I have to review the client interview sheets that are written up afterwards, I was really impressed with the amount of information that people found for the clients. That seemed to be much more than is normally the case, and that's possibly because they weren't dealing with a person on the phone at the same time, because then you kind of feel a little bit more under pressure to provide an answer straight away.
Yes.
Whereas when you know that you've got time, you do perhaps more research or do it a bit more in depth, and so that was one difference that I noticed.
Yes. Well, shall we have some music? We've got a CD waiting, so we'll just put that on, hopefully. Have I?
Things in life are bad. To all the girls I've loved before, who travel in and out my door, I'm glad they came along. I dedicate this song to all the girls I've loved before, to all the girls I once caressed, and may I say I've had the best for helping me to grow. I owe a lot, I know, to all the girls I've loved before. The winds of change are always blowing, and every time I try to stay, the winds of change continue blowing, and they just carry me away. To all the girls who share my life, who now are someone else's wives, I'm glad they came along. I dedicate this song to all the girls I've loved before, to all the girls who cared for me, who filled my nights with ecstasy. They live within my heart. I'll always be a part of all the girls I've loved before. The winds of change are always blowing, and every time I try to stay, the winds of change continue blowing, and they just carry me away. loved before, who traveled in and out our door. We're glad they came along. We dedicate this song to all the girls we've loved before, to all the girls we've loved before, who travel in and out our doors. We're glad they came along. We dedicate this song to all the girls we've loved before.
Oh no, wrong one. Okay, we're back on air, and thanks to Heather, we've got some really nitty-gritty things to talk about, and we'll get started on an example of what we've had in the Bureau. Right.
I had a look at the case sheets of some of the calls that we'd had while we were locked down, and I've chosen one here that I'll talk to you about. A client phoned about how much notice she should give as a tenant on a commercial building she has been leasing for 6 years. Another question she asked is that she'd been paying insurance and rates for all this time, and she really felt it was the landlord's responsibility. So how much notice should she give, and should she be paying rates and insurance? So unless you're familiar with the rules and the laws about tenancy, you would need to do some research for a question like this. Yeah. And so this is what happened. The information that was discussed with the client. Found information on paying insurances and rates. This is often shared by the landlord and the tenant, and should specifically say what is expected of the tenant and the landlord. Also suggested the tenant gets legal advice about her lease agreement, or suggested the tenant phones her local community law centre just for another opinion and support.
So Heather, when somebody has a tenancy agreement,
yes,
is that in there, the insurance? Is that in the tenancy agreement in a standard one, or do you have to request it?
I don't know the answer to that exactly. I'm not familiar with tenancy law, but I would think in any question about tenancy, the first thing to check is, do they have a tenancy agreement, and get them to read it and see whether the questions that they're asking are actually answered in their agreement, and really they should be.
Yes. Yes.
It gets tricky when they either don't have an agreement or it's not written clearly or something like that, and then we would probably direct them to talk to the tenancy tribunal or tenancy services and get some clarification.
Yeah. So if somebody has problems, they can bring them into us, can't they? And we can have a look at the agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes people read a document and they really don't understand what it means. So if they bring it in, we can put 2 or 3 heads together and see if we can understand it. Or we can look up the information either online or in the community law manual that we have in the office and see what the rules are and what the legal wording is that they might need to understand, and that will help them to clarify what it actually means, what their agreement says or what it doesn't say, perhaps.
Yes. Well, that's fairly clear, but often 2 heads are better than 1 or 3.
Oh, very often. Because people in our bureau have had all sorts of life experiences and their business lives and just their own personal experience. And so often we know enough to be able to know where to look for things or to be able to direct people into finding out the correct information.
That's great, yes.
So what this person who was in the CB person did was also looked up on our CAB CABnet, which is our database. And they've come up with this: I'm a commercial tenant and can't pay my rent. What help is available for me? And so there's a whole list of information here on what they can do, who can do what.
So commercial is quite different, isn't it?
It's more involved perhaps than just your local round town tenancy agreement.
Well, and some of the problems that are creeping in now is the fact that some businesses are having to close down, aren't they?
Well, they are.
And then they've got the problem of how do they terminate an agreement?
Exactly, because quite often a lease agreement has a timeline on it.
Yes.
You've agreed that you will lease this building or office space or whatever it is until such and such a time. And just because the country's shut down is no excuse for getting out of that. You know, this is a legal contract that you've made and you're obliged to pay it. And the difficulty is that you've signed that up, expecting to be able to operate your business there and create enough money to be able to pay your lease. Suddenly you find you can't run your business, you've got no income. How on earth are you going to pay for this?
Yeah.
So it's a really tricky situation. And there's no easy answer for either side, because the person that owns the building or the property wants to be paid, but also they probably want to keep their tenant, because finding a new tenant is not so easy either.
No. So they could come to some agreement if the business is still operating, but they need to slow it down, or they have slowed it down. And if both parties can agree on lowering the rent or
taking a holiday from the rent for
there are
that
things.
Sort of thing. So they could renegotiate the terms. Possibly. I don't know the legalities of that, though, or whether you'd have to get another contract drawn up for that interim time frame. Not sure how that works.
But like all things that happen, if you talk to the person,
absolutely,
it helps the situation.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that I have been told in the past. If a situation changes and you owe people money, or you've got the first thing you do is let that person know that you are having difficulties, because the sooner you can come to an agreement, the better.
Oh, that's right. And circumstances change in life. You know, nothing is set in concrete and absolutely guaranteed. We have our fingers crossed and we hope and we expect, and most of the time it does actually turn out to be okay.
Yeah.
But when it doesn't, that's exactly right. The first thing to do is go and talk to the person that you owe money to or you've got a contract with, and explain your circumstances, and use some common sense.
Yes.
And work out a solution together, because both parties need to have a win, and you need to work out a win-win situation too, because the person who owns the property wants a tenant, the person who's the tenant wants the property. But because the thing that holds them together is the business function that's going on and creating the wealth to pay for it has crashed, then you've got to work out how can you overcome that until you can get back on track. Now, if the business gets up and going again, that's fine, you can carry on. But unfortunately, not all businesses were able to get up and running again. And I don't know how you overcome that problem then, because you've got a contract that you can't meet.
Exactly. And then the landlord might, more than likely, has a debt to pay as well. So it's tough times.
Yes.
Tough times indeed. Right. Shall we have some music?
Yes.
Okay. I will have to play the music. With that one.
I saw her by an old water well. Was she lost? I couldn't tell. It was dark, I wasn't sure where I was. Just a lonely figure standing there, rain dripping through her hair. Asked if I could take her somewhere, she said yes. She looked around as if to say goodbye, picked up the old case by her side, teardrops welling in her eyes. She got in. She sat there wiping at her tears. When she spoke I had to strain to hear, spoke as if I wasn't even there. She told me how she left the farm, left her man and her kids alone. She couldn't stay and face the shame, first the drought and then the rain. Yesterday the banker came with the auctioneer to sell the farm. Couldn't go through it all again, she couldn't stand the shame. Got 4 kids back on the farm, 2 girls, 2 boys, and of course her man, range in age from 3 to 9. God, I pray they'll all be fine. 3 long years with no income, had to hide her husband's gun. Hope he don't find it and hurt no one. She couldn't stand the shame.
Well, looks like we have a few technical difficulties, so we'll carry on and eject that CD. Now, Heather, back to our business.
We've been talking about some of the client interviews that we'd had during the lockdown. So here's another one that caught my eye. A young woman from Christchurch came through to our bureau, and she had had a DIC, drunken charge, case back in January and had been to court twice. She's now 24 weeks pregnant and has received a sale or disposal notice from the police for her 2013 Suzuki Swift. She doesn't know why this has occurred and needs her wheels. She notices there's in the small print that maybe the sale disposal won't happen if it places her in hardship, but she says it will do that. What should she do? The information discussed with the client was, this is a legal matter, and whilst she could talk with the police about the notice, she didn't sound very confident about the entire situation, so she was referred to the Canterbury Community Law Service to have support through the legal process and fully explain things to her. That we gave her the contact number and the email address and read the notice. Current no face-to-face but by appointment.
So did that lady actually have any guarantee with that car? Because was it a second-hand car?
Yes.
I think it was, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. I can remember that case. Well, roughly, vaguely, yes.
It was 2013 Suzuki Swift.
Yes.
But it seemed to be that if she can prove the necessity for her to have her wheels, then she can somehow override the notice to have her car removed, sale or disposal, have the car removed from her. And I'm being pregnant, of course, and I don't know where she lived in relation to the services that she would require due to that. She can prove that a car is a necessity to her. But it's all very well knowing that, but then how do you go about it? So the advice was to contact the Community Law Service, because they would know the precise procedure that she needed to go through and to be able to support her through the process. So to get her started, put her in touch with the right people, make sure she fully understands the process and what she needed to do.
So did this all happen in lockdown?
Yes.
What a difficult situation.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
Very hard. And there was no one handy to help her take her places, because in lockdown, you're not meant to do that.
Told to stay home, weren't we?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, my goodness. This country has been through a rough time, hasn't it?
It certainly has. And for a lot of people, staying home, like for me, for example, staying home wasn't a hardship for me because I'm retired and I didn't need to go anywhere and I'm not running a business, so I had nothing urgent I needed to do.
No.
Staying home was easy for me, and I just really didn't understand some of the hardships that other people came across and really what it means in terms suddenly stop your life.
Yes.
Stop it dead. Don't go anywhere. Stay home. It's really quite drastic, isn't it?
It is. A lot of people actually quite enjoyed it, but others didn't.
No. I know. And because I did, I really didn't consider necessarily how difficult it was for other people. But of course, being at CAB and then reading all the case sheets, and they came in from all around the country, really did open my eyes and make me understand that for a lot of people it was extremely difficult.
Yes, yeah. And especially people who weren't well, and the worry of actually going to see a doctor or a medical person. And
right, just getting food, just being able to get your groceries. But what I also did notice was that a lot of people rallied and started to provide services or kindness, because we were taught be kind, and so people did check on their neighbours and their elderly neighbours and check that they were able to get their groceries, and then help them with their shopping and do shopping for them and things like that. So I think a lot of people did step up and go the extra mile for their neighbours or their friends or other things.
I think that's going to stay too. I think a lot of people are now in the habit of ordering online, and they're going to buy things on, their groceries online, have them delivered, have them ready. You go to the supermarket even now, which is only a short time, and you see supermarket staff going around with a trolley loading it up, and you think, oh well, they're doing that for a client.
They're shopping for someone. Yes. Yep.
I think the hard thing for me doing that would be that I like to have a choice, and unless you really know what you like, there's always temptation to have something else, isn't there?
Oh, for sure.
But a new brand or a different type of thing. Yes. Yeah. Right, it's like buying biscuits for CAB.
Buying biscuits.
Everybody has their likes and dislikes.
They sure do.
Yeah.
And if the biscuits are not there, it
oh boy,
creates a problem. And part of that is expectation, isn't it? That we expect when we go to CAB and we do our duty, we're there for 3 or 4 hours at a time, that partway through that time we're able to make ourselves a drink and a cup of tea or coffee and have a couple of biscuits.
Yeah.
It's just an expectation. And if there are no biscuits, we feel really hard done by.
Yes, well, they'll be replenished today.
Good.
Right, now where are we? We've got another problem, or do you want us to...
That really led me into this buying and selling online, and there was an article in our papers, like CAB writes articles for the local publications around the district,
yes,
don't they? And is it once a month or so?
Yes.
And there was one a wee while ago, buying and selling online. And so having just talked about being able to get your groceries in lockdown, and many people learnt to do that online, there's this article here that perhaps you all read, but anyway, I'll skim through it.
Some people don't get the papers, so it's really worth reading.
I'll read this then.
Great article, yeah.
Buying and selling online. Anyone who sells or buys online should have an understanding of the legislative protection that applies to these transactions. It may be fair to say that during our viral lockdown, more people are turning to shopping online. Yeah, we just said that. Whether it be a supermarket, a butcher, or even buying the likes of knitting wool. Just knowing that the internet is not a free-for-all where anything goes, the Fair Trading Act applies to all traders who advertise or sell to New Zealand consumers online, even if the trader is based outside of New Zealand. Traders who sell online must also make it clear that they are in trade, so that consumers know that they are protected under the Fair Trading Act and the Consumer Guarantees Act. A private person who's selling their own private stuff is not a trader necessarily, so you need to understand the difference between a trader and a private sale. There's a difference, isn't there?
There are quite a few different websites that you can go into for buying. Some new ones have popped up. Have you noticed that?
No.
I have, because I don't. But a friend of mine recommended, it came through via Facebook, a friend recommending that she had bought these things online. And I thought, yeah, well, I have never heard of that website before. And I thought, oh, leave it for someone else.
Good answer.
If in doubt, pull out.
Yep.
That's what I always say.
And if you really don't know, ring CAB.
Yes.
And get some information.
I think so, yeah.
But I'll continue with this article. The Fair Trading Act's definition of trade is broad. Any trade, industry, profession, occupation, activity of commerce or understanding relating to the supply or acquisition of goods or services. It is fairly broad. Sellers who are uncertain whether they are in trade should have sought legal advice and can't avoid their legislative obligations by having someone else sell or make offers on their behalf. Anyone selling goods initially bought or acquired for their own personal use is not in trade. For the list of obligations sellers must have, you can go to www.consumeraffairs.govt.nz. The Consumer Guarantees Act applies to goods and services that are ordinarily purchased from a trader or personal, domestic and household use. Goods must match their description, have no undisclosed defects, be fit for the normal purpose, safe, durable, of reasonable quality and acceptable in look and finish.
We have had quite a few people complaining about buying online and finding that when they got it was a vehicle that was meant to be going, and when they went and got it, it didn't make it home. It broke down. And what redress did they have, and those sort of things. And so you do have to make sure that you do the right inspections when you pick up a vehicle to make sure that it is what they say it is.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there are quite a lot of rules about buying second-hand vehicles, aren't there, and buying and selling online too. And so it's very important if you are buying a car or a vehicle that you know who you're buying from, whether it's a trader or whether it's a private person, because the guarantees are different. If you're buying from a private person and it's a private sales, you're not covered by the Consumer Guarantees Act, are you?
No.
So you need to watch out for that. But if you're buying from a dealer and doing it online, then you are protected.
A lot of dealers put vehicles on Trade Me, don't they?
They certainly do. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And now there are a lot of businesses putting their goods on Trade Me.
Yes, so that's an important thing to know when you're buying online, whether you're buying from a private person and whether you're buying for your own private use, or whether you're buying from a trader or a dealer,
yes.
In which case you're protected by the Consumer Guarantees Act.
Yeah, and it's different if you're buying for commercial use.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yep.
So there are quite a few fish hooks there, aren't there?
Well, there can be, but we've got some quick tips for buying online.
Right.
The first one is be savvy.
Yes.
Doubts arise. If doubts arise or the offer seems too good to be true, then don't proceed. The old saying, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Yes.
Know who you're dealing with, which is really what we were just saying. Search the seller online, where they're based, and do they provide contact and site details. Don't assume just because a website ends in .co.nz that it's a New Zealand-based business.
Yes, now that's what's happened with a lot of problems over the lockdown with the delivery of goods, and people didn't realise that they were coming from Australia or further afield, and so there was a huge time delay. In fact,
Right.
it was taking ages. Yes.
Well, the borders were closed, and there was not much trade going on at all, was there?
No, and even one of my co-workers had problems with a checkbook that was came from Australia, and of course that came in the mail, but was delayed.
Right.
Yeah, he was found it quite stressful, even though we are going into the digital age. Some people that still need to operate a checkbook, so that was a hard one for that person to deal with.
Expectations again. What you expect and what you get don't always match, do they?
No. Right. Well, I think that we've covered that pretty well, Heather. And now it's time for me to play another track. So we are going to play another bit of music.
This feeling before, I never wanted anyone more, and something in your eyes tells me you feel the way that
I feel like you do. If you would like to stay here all night, you know that I would say it's alright.
Let me give you all of me. All of your body and soul, every kind of love you can express, all the secret dreams you never told.
I want everything.
Everything.
Well, hope you enjoyed that little break. And we are back to give you a bit more info. Heather, what have you got lined up now?
You're just talking about breaks, and for a lot of people in this country, we do take breaks, and very often that involves travelling overseas somewhere, and we've enjoyed the luxury of that for many years on our cut, and that we, if we want a holiday, we go to Oz, we go around the world and all the rest of it, and that was a big shock to a lot of people that we couldn't just up sticks and hop on an aeroplane and go somewhere. But a lot of people had difficulties, like this client that rang and said they had bought an Air New Zealand ticket to go to Australia in October this year.
Yes.
And they had just been sent an email cancelling the flights, and they were offered a voucher. And the caller would like to know why she cannot get a refund, as they are talking of the Tasman bubble and possible flights to Australia from September. She wanted to go on October. Well, of course, we've had a little bit of water under the bridge since this time, and Air New Zealand came into a great deal of flack because they weren't giving refunds to anybody. But I think they've now changed that a little bit. Anyway, this call, what happened was, the information that was discussed with the client was that there seemed to be no option other than a voucher at this time from the airline flying to Australia, and some other destinations, Europe and America, had different rules, and refunds were given in some circumstances if those destinations were affected. The reason Air New Zealand is able to offer credits rather than refunds is because airlines in New Zealand are exempted from normal air trading provisions, which force companies to provide refunds to customers.
So, can you say that again? Air New Zealand was exempt.
The reason Air New Zealand was able to offer credits rather than refunds is because airlines in New Zealand are exempted from normal fair trading provisions, which force companies to provide refunds to customers. So they were special. They didn't have to obey the rules for whatever reasons.
No.
No.
Oh.
Under the Consumer Guarantees Act, if you bought a fridge, a car or a set of linen sheets before the pandemic, and the company you bought them from cancelled your order and didn't deliver the goods in reasonable time, you are entitled to a full refund.
Yes.
Not so if you bought a plane ticket. Under the Civil Aviation Act, basically a loophole for airlines, Air New Zealand is legally entitled to keep your money unless it is the airline's fault your flight is cancelled. If it's a problem with the weather or a global pandemic, well, that's tough. They can keep your money. If they are feeling generous, they can offer you a credit you may or may not be able to use.
Can they change the schedule and then not give you a refund if you can't fly on that day? Probably can out of lockdown, but
yes,
it's tricky, isn't it?
It is tricky. So the options are that you contact Air New Zealand and ask for the terms and conditions for that specific ticket. So when you get a plane ticket, it will have a lot of fine print on it, no doubt, and so you need to read the fine print and understand, and probably most of us don't. We just buy a ticket and hop on a plane, don't we?
Well, and I think that a lot of people had problems actually getting through.
Yes,
as well.
Oh, true. Yes.
They sit on the phone for ages.
Hours, yeah.
Yes.
And find out what the cancellation rules are.
Yes.
Contact Master Credit Card and see what they have. Contact MasterCard Credit Card and see what they have to say. Their travel insurance, as they are also they're also a party to the agreement. So if you paid by credit card,
yes.
What are the credit card company's rules about the agreement too?
Yes.
So you really have to delve into the legalities of the contract that you've entered into by buying the ticket in the first place.
Yeah.
Now, we're not used to doing that. We just buy a ticket and expect to hop on a plane and off we go.
So do they mention anything about buying your ticket through a travel agent? Because I think that the travel agents can help with your with making sure that you get your money back.
Okay. Well, let me carry on through this process then.
Yeah.
There were 2 websites that were looked into and given information from. One was titled, "What are my rights if my travel or holiday plans have been disrupted by COVID-19?" And the other one was, "My travel agent is charging me a large fee for cancelling my travel bookings. Can they do that?" So I printed these out to have a look. A travel agent can charge a fee for cancelling a booking for you. However, they should have told you about this fee when you made the booking, and it should be written in the contract with your travel agent. Also, the travel agent's fee should only be enough to cover their reasonable costs of cancelling your booking. Otherwise, they could be in breach of the unfair contract provisions of the Fair Trading Act. If you think your travel agent's cancellation fee is unreasonably large, you can make a complaint to the Commerce Commission.
Oh dear.
Goodness me.
There is so much that has come up in this last, how many weeks?
Yeah, 6 or 8 weeks.
6 or 8 weeks, yes. We were
And it's
sailing along, everyone was very happy and no problems when you were travelling. Now it becomes...
And we trusted the process because things worked. And we didn't realise or understand, or many of us didn't, I should speak for myself, I never thought about it really. What are my legal obligations and what contracts have I actually entered into by booking a plane fare or paying money to do this or that, or paying in advance for something that I haven't received yet? What happens when it all goes wrong? For me, in my life, hardly anything ever went wrong, so I never needed to know. And now suddenly things are falling down around our ears, and we are suddenly scrambling to learn what are the rules, what are the legal requirements in these situations. And so we're having to learn all sorts of things.
Yeah. An awful lot of travel companies used to, if you had to, for some reason, had to cancel your booking, would only want to give you a credit.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's fine when things are going well, but when it happened to my husband a couple of years ago, and a small company went bust, and they'd only given him a credit, and he didn't use the flight, and he lost it.
They lost it.
Yeah.
I suppose the expectation has been that if you can't go this month or next month, well, you can go in a couple of months or later on, and so you will sooner or later you will go. So we don't need to give you money back. We'll just postpone it really for a while. But that just doesn't work anymore, does it? For all sorts of reasons that
no,
the world has changed.
And a bit the same when it comes to vouchers. Just make sure that you use them in good time. And make sure the vouchers are for a bigger firm that you know is going to honour your vouchers in a year's time, because that can be they can expire, or the business can change hands.
Yes,
and they don't have to honour your voucher. Yeah. So there are certainly a lot of problems out there. So you just have to be very careful how you go, and that's why Citizens Advice is there to give you a lending hand.
And to delve into the things that you might not know, or even if you've read this fine print, do you understand it?
Yeah.
And if not, ring CAB and get someone to help you to understand it, or to delve a bit further down into the rules and the laws of things so that you are fully informed.
Yes. And we do keep a record confidentially and of anybody who has digitally been excluded.
For sure. So That's right. Often for older people particularly, if we haven't grown up using computers, or if they haven't naturally occurred during our working life, we get to a stage where we just can't access information in the same ways that we used to.
No.
And so the world becomes narrower and more shut down, and it creates problems.
Well, Heather, we are at the end of the program. So thank you very much for coming in and supporting me, and really appreciate all the work that you do in the Bureau. And as a colleague, we have some really good times together.
We do. Thank you. It'd be my pleasure.
Thank you. And goodbye from CABTalk.